And welcome to Life Support Live, the weekly live show that explores how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
As a certain famous Starfleet captain once said, to which another famous starship captain a century earlier had also said, though, wherever our mission takes us, we'll try to have a little fun along the way.
Hello, everyone. I'm psychologist Dr. Ali Mattu.
Hey, and I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. One of us is a real doctor.
And we'll leave it to you to figure out who that might be. Welcome to another Life Support Live. This week we are talking about wisdom. There's a lot, actually, for us to talk about here. And we want to get started right away by hearing your thoughts. What is your favorite Star Trek episode that features wisdom, a wise character, a wise course of action, wise advice? Let us know in the comments below. Hey, Larry, if this is yes, sir.
Aside from telling everybody what we're doing, I think our audience this morning is going, okay, wait a minute, guys. We started off with PTSD and depression and anxiety and lack of sleep, and now we're doing wisdom? What kind of a traumatic topic is that? But I would just remind everybody that we're taking our themes of the week from the current Star Trek episode, whatever aired. And this last week's episode of Discovery, we talked about it as we always do, and came up with this as the theme. But I mean, there's some caveats and all that. But I mean, I took it away as wisdom from experience.
Yeah, and we're gonna dive into all that sort of stuff. Larry, if this is people's first time here, what exactly is Life Support Live?
Oh well, that's easy. Life Support Live is right here. Oh, what said what? It's gonna be one of those Saturdays. No, Life Support Live is, as our name says, we go boldly through uncertain times, and that implies that yes, we are geeking out on Star Trek. Usually one issue at a time, one theme at a time across all the pantheon. But currently, while we've got new Trek, we're being inspired by that week's episode to look at other episodes too, at all the titles. But yeah, we do mental health through a Star Trek lens, or Star Trek through a mental health lens. Either way, we have a lot of fun. Hopefully send you away, thanks to all of the sections of the show, and yes, there is a structure to this. You come away with some tips for daily living, and generally, as everyone keeps saying, we have a good time.
Yes. We are getting some feedback that there's some choppiness.
I'm having very choppy audio, from you.
Yeah, from me. Yeah. Larry, what should I do here? Yeah, it seems like folks are saying that you're lagging a little bit. Larry, can I bring you back into the show?
Yes, please do.
Can I kick you out and bring you back in?
Please kick me out.
All right, bear with us, folks, as we are trying to fix whatever the heck it's happening over here. I'm going to try to bring in Larry again. And while we are waiting on Larry, let me talk about why we picked wisdom this week. So this week's episode actually comes from all of you. So every week, as we do with Star Trek Discovery, we like to, and as we did with Star Trek Lower Decks, we try to take this week's episode and have it come from an inspiration that happened on the new Star Trek that we all watched this week. This week's Star Trek Discovery episode we weren't sure which direction to go. The reason for that is we really want to do something that's new and different than the stuff we've talked about in previous episodes. And then we also want to take that theme and use it to explore new episodes, or at least episodes that might be new to Life Support Live, new aspects of the canon that we haven't quite discussed before. So, with that in mind, we asked you all on our Facebook group, and today's topic was actually inspired by what Jared said. And what he said, we asked ideas for this week's episode, and Jared said, just because you aren't up to date doesn't mean you aren't useful. And that got Larry and I thinking, well, okay, what are the different ways where we can take that theme? One is older technology is still useful. And then the more we kept playing with it, the more we kept coming back to this idea of wisdom. That your experience has given you some type of perspective that might be really useful in a situation, and we don't necessarily want to dismiss someone because they might not at first glance appear to have as much to offer. Jared says, funny that you pick wisdom. There's actually a book released this week titled The Wisdom of Picard. I remember seeing an ad for that, but I forgot about that. That was a while ago. So yeah, thanks, Jared. Very excited to talk about this. Hopefully, Larry will be back soon. I don't know, or he's just kind of left me with this this empty head over here. And Scott says, and don't forget Mr. Spock's Mr. Spock's Little Book of Mindfulness. Okay, so let's see. Looks like Larry's having a little trouble logging in here. Let me see if I can rectify that. Older technology. Cairo says older technology is still useful, like the book of Samuel Cogley, attorney-in-law. Yeah, good one there. Okay, let's see, folks. Just bear with me. I'm going to be trying to bring in Larry another way. Hopefully this will work. Just 1 minute, folks, and we will all be enjoying a little bit more Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek here. Let's see. Hopefully this will work. Hope you all are having a good week here. I am very tired and very excited. Excited to be here with you all. Tired because it was a very busy week that felt like a very long week. All right. Okay, let's see. All right, so back to the show. Okay, Larry just needs to dial in now. Hopefully he will be here. I am hearing Larry dial. Let's see. 1 moment, folks.
Okay.
And you're back, Larry.
I'm here. Okay. Old school.
Let's make sure your mic is the right mic.
Let's make sure it is. Where are we?
Because it sounds like it's not.
Where am I?
Safety is, Jared says safety's on or off.
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious, Scott. Oh my God, Larry is future guy from Enterprise. He did, when you disappeared, you were just this this static kind of shadow. So yeah, folks, Larry is future. We finally solved the riddle.
Take that, Brandon. Yeah. How's the audio?
Sounds the same.
Sounds the same as in bad same?
Yeah, not as good as what we had
Okay,
before.
well, I'm got right mic in Skype. Say that 3 times fast. I have
But folks are saying you're in sync and you seem much more clear. So that's very good.
okay. I don't know what to say about audio. What do I have to? I shouldn't have to worry about Skype, right? I've got Skype.
No, check Skype because whatever Skype is sending is what I'm getting.
No, I'm saying I have. I've looked at Skype and my system both, and they're both.
They're both a good mic?
Yeah. My good mic. Very good mic.
Can you tap the mic? Can we make sure it's that? Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure. Well, that's the mic. I'm not sure why the audio is not coming in.
Is it muffled? Is it crackling? Is it... Why we had
well,
such...
folks are saying it's better. So
Okay.
folks are saying it's better, so let's... on with the show. So, Larry, I was telling folks...
Please.
I was telling folks why we picked this week's theme, that it was really coming from Jared's recommendation, his comment about just because you aren't up to date
Don't tell
doesn't
Jared
mean you're
that.
useful.
It'll swell his head even more.
And it kind of got us thinking about wisdom. And so
Smart.
there's a lot of wisdom actually thinking this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery. First off, non-spoiler impressions of this week's episode of Discovery. I know Scott mentioned in his comments that he really enjoyed it. Larry, what were your thoughts on non-spoiler thoughts on this week's Disco?
Well, this week's Disco was awesome. They walk into Starfleet headquarters, and there's a 3D representation of the galaxy map that I worked on, and I was frame grabbing. And then I heard other stuff happen in the show too.
I saw. Not only was that your map, but you got a little shout out on Twitter.
Yeah, and it's not my map. I worked on the latest version of it and did the last updates. So it's always Mike's baby, and then Jeff did the original groundbreaking work on it. Jeff Mandel after Mike Okuda, but and with Mike McMaster and with Franz Joseph Schnabelt before that, working on versions. But yeah, I was just blown away. It's beautiful, and they haven't shown it. And the graphic designer and I, or the art director and I, started talking on Twitter about it, and he promised more views coming up, as if they need anything else besides views of the star map. I was like, yeah, those actors keep insisting on getting in the way. But no, it was overall the show was great. Then the ship nerds all had plenty to nerd out about because, and you know what, people went gaga. If it hadn't been all the pre-show hype about the USS Nog, spoilers, actually has nothing to do with the show. But I was busy, like, it's over at the side. People are all like, it was right in your face, and it wasn't. And I totally missed it the first time because it wasn't because of the star map. I was looking at everything else in the scene, the things that you could see easier. But anyway, aside from that, it was Sean, I know the writer Sean a little bit. We've talked and interviewed before, but I thought it was a great episode. It had Starfleet-y drama. It had a little mystery that was spooky. It had all these weird little, you could tell the beginning of personal arcs with Cronenberg, the director there, being, what is he? I kept wanting to smoke a cigarette and put it down. I want it to be the new version of the Trek Files. Yeah, I just want him to bust out with a cigarette and put it in an ashtray. But yeah, the Georgiou plot, the end of the line for Non, maybe. But anyway, yeah, a lot of interesting pieces that I thought was... I could not believe how much story there was. I kept looking at the clock, and I don't mean in a bored way. I'm like, they're going to wrap this up, and oh my God, it's only 30 minutes. It's only been 40 minutes. I just thought it was a really jam-packed show for all the right reasons, and made sense going from A to B. And then I'm thinking, what are we going to talk about this week? Because I could see 3 or 4 plots. And there was one scene, I may talk about it later, there's one scene that really spoke to me. It's part of our theme today, and we kind of came back around to it as we stumbled around for themes. But what did you think?
I'm really loving this season of Star Trek Discovery, Larry. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but one of the comedy sitcoms my wife and I like to watch is Superstore. We really love this show, and I know this feels like a tangent, but I will promise I will bring it back around.
Because one thing we don't allow on this show is tangents.
Yeah, I know. We love watching Superstore, and it just recently came back, and it came back in a very COVID way, where COVID is part of the storyline. The series picks up right back in February and March of this year as COVID is starting to happen in the United States. Well, I didn't really enjoy it because it felt a little bit too close to home, and a lot of it was just not very. It wasn't very funny to me to make these jokes about social distancing and masks. Like it felt like there wasn't enough separation between reality and this.
Too soon.
Superstore, what's that?
Too soon?
Too soon. It felt like it was too soon. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about Superstore is it does tackle a lot of real world themes. It's tackled issues related to ICE and immigration enforcement in the United States and a lot of stuff. So it's a show that can tackle contemporary themes well, but it was just hard for me to joke about or laugh about COVID in this way. Anyways, I mention all of that because this season of Star Trek Discovery seems to be very much about now and about being in an uncertain future and being having to navigate and not know a lot of information and having to really rely on each other and issues of trust and issues of connection and love in a time where it's very hard to have hope. So it's both very distant. I mean, we're talking about the 32nd century here, but it's also feels like there's so much social commentary here, and this is all written and shot.
I was going to say this was all written and shot over a year and a half ago. Well, a year before conceived and written over a year before February, March, and they started shooting like in June, July of 2019. Yeah.
So I every week
these locations in Iceland, they're gonna love this. It's like no. It's so
every week seems to be more and more relevant to the world we live in now. So as Linda says, exactly as Star Trek should be. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. So each episode has given us something really to enjoy, and the ship nerds like myself, we're really enjoying that. I'm loving the sets and the art direction here, all the programmable matter, how that plays out. Really enjoying that. I loved seeing. I saw a little bit of the motion picture and also Star Trek 2009 in that moment where the crew is sort of at the window and they're looking at all the ships and they're sort of like, oh my gosh, look at that, look at that, look at that. I love that. I didn't pick up on USS Nog when I watched it. That blew up on social media. I didn't see the detail there. I definitely noticed the USS Voyager NCC 656 J. I take that as J for Janeway. That was very cool. And then obviously there's a story, which you're right. We could have gone in many different directions with this episode. One of the things we were thinking about, there is a theme of home. What does home mean? Your friendships, relying on. We talked about chosen family a little bit, but wisdom seemed to be the right.
Who you choose to name ships after? There's many things.
Right.
Many things.
Not only ships, but the class.
Apparently which it's a nerd thing, but
give me the nerd thing. Now it's your turn.
It's John Eves, who's a great friend who knows his Star Trek, who loves ship designing, and people love John Eves' ships since generations and since early DS9. But he keeps naming these, like the Discovery is there was the Discovery and the Glenn, and those were supposed to be the only two ships. But the class is called the Crossfield class, which is named for a test pilot, and that's cool. But it's like, where's the USS Crossfield? It's like, I don't, so now we've got the Eisenberg class. So the ships in this class are named for my head canon immediately was people who were the first of their planet to be in Starfleet. So in my head canon, there's a USS Worf out there somewhere, and I don't know, go down the list. But then I'm like, so there's a USS Eisenberg because Eisenberg was the first Jewish human in Starfleet? I don't know. It's like, what does that mean? Anyway, I know it's a nice homage and people are all wrapped up in it and, weepy and smiley. But part of my Star Trek brain is going, okay.
Yeah, the Starfleet of 32nd century works a little bit differently, maybe on their ship.
You're not trivial, Eric. Come on, listen to your own mantras. Yeah,
well, Scott says Admiral Vance's costume was gorgeously constructed, and that's something else I've really been enjoying is the costumes, the set design, all the art direction. I think is really wonderful. It's just nice, Larry, to see a very a kind of a reimagining of what all of this can be in much the same way as TNG was for TOS. It's nice. It's nice to be so far in the future that we don't have to have these debates about, well, why do they have all this advanced holographic technology?
Like Jared said back here.
Yes.
Says,
I'm liking that we're getting away from canon. It's 1,000 years in the future.
Except now this is canon. See, that kind of thing always kills me because, like, well, this is canon now. This is what the 32nd century looks like for everybody who's going to cosplay it and build props and everything.
We're getting away from the story we know.
23rd century canon. Yeah. That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
See, okay. This is a topic for my show on Tuesdays. This is what people get lost in. It's like, no, this is simple. It's like this is 23rd century canon up to that point, and so they're playing with it. Now, I was confused because when they first started talking about the Tekoff, the seed ship.
Yes.
She says in the 23rd century, the Tekoff, was a seed ship like the Vault in Norway or Sweden, wherever it is. The Doomsday Seed Vault, And, it's Tekla.
All right, Tekla. We're just popping out of the show to say hi to you as well.
Yeah. Don't say that. I will pop out of the show.
Yeah, as you did earlier. Right.
Anyway, the Tekoff, and then he says, well, yeah, the Tekoff is over here. And I'm like, wait, they've had through the burn and everything, they've had a seed ship, the same ship for 800 years. And then they show it as the M. And I'm like, okay, did they mean, it's like there's a weird thing now where it's like, oh, she says, that's the 11th generation. And I guess they mean the evolution. That's the 11th. It's like it's like that, the Intrepid Design class with the needle nose, the spoon face primary hull or whatever. It's like every time we upgrade and name a new ship Voyager, it's going to have that same shape, and we're just going to put new. Anyway, there were a couple of like weird little. I was like, what? What?
I was a little surprised to see the Voyager silhouette so
was
similar.
Like the same ship 800 years later, and then they put M on it, and I went. So the seed ship is always going to be called the Tekov? I mean, I'm like, what? Okay. Different ship.
Well, maybe they're running out of things to name the ships.
Well, the planets are shrinking. Well, I'm still trying to figure out why Earth is not a member anymore, but everybody running around are plainly Earth. Admiral Vance. That's such an admiral name. Admiral Vance. I was like, wow. Are you sure Earth isn't a member and still sending these guys over?
Yeah, I mean, Cairo has a point. The Enterprises maintain a bit of an aesthetic, and we haven't seen the full cut of that of the USS Voyager J. Speaking of the Enterprise, I think the Enterprise is a goner. I don't think there is an Enterprise in the 32nd century. Given what happened with the burn, I think if there was an Enterprise, I don't know, at that point it would be. We're getting late in the alphabet here. I don't know, the Enterprise X. I don't know, whatever it might have been, but I think the Enterprise was probably active. And
thank you, Scott. Anyway,
yeah,
I was trying to remember.
Anyways.
I was trying to remember the Benzite that was the first in Starfleet, and Scott got it there. USS Mendon. Anyway,
so let's talk about wisdom. We can geek out about. This is not the Utopia Planitia live show. This is Life Support Live. Larry, when it comes to wisdom, I think there's a few different ways. If you want to do Utopia Planitia live, we can talk about that.
Get your show, Bucko. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I would love to do a show where I just talk about Star Trek models for like an hour with folks, because I love the Star Trek models. Anyways,
you mean like the Maisie series, the Barbara series, the... Oh no, forget it. Okay.
Went over my head. Okay, so...
Mud androids model. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Wisdom. I see.
Having the wisdom to shut up and move on with your topic. Yes.
Let's talk about wisdom. There's a few different ways where I think it plays out. So one is technically these people are all so much older than everyone in Discovery is quote older, depending on what your views are of time, travel, and age, and how you define all of that sort of stuff. Maybe they're not older than Admiral Vance, and just in terms of from their own life perspective, but their information can feel so out of date because they are from the 23rd century. And yet, Michael and the crew of the Discovery have so much more to offer. So that's one piece of wisdom there. And how they approach this problem is very different than how Starfleet, 32nd century Starfleet is approaching it. But I think there's another real angle of wisdom with Hugh. Hugh's character here, boy, he's had some
Dr.
wonderful...
Culp.
Yes, not Borg Hugh.
And not Q.
No, not Q. Hugh. No. I should clarify. Thank you, Larry. He's had some wonderful moments these past few episodes, and I think in this episode in particular, he offers a lot of wisdom. In much the traditional way of thinking about it, as someone who's able to distill a lot of information down in a very helpful way and share it with someone else. I thought he was really the epitome of wisdom in this episode.
What scene are you talking about?
When
I think of him doctoring on the Keeley, and I think of his interrogation scene where he goes, "Yeah, I died."
Wasn't he giving advice to both Michael as well as is it Non? About how to move forward he's in the away team, right. Yeah, on the away team. Really about like mortality.
That to me is like
and
such
grief.
A separate little episode. It's like the away team episode was like a whole, which is cool. That's a compliment.
Yeah,
but it was like
there was a lot, as you were saying. There's a lot packed into this episode, and that was another theme we're thinking about. We're like, oh my gosh, well, grief is a big theme of this episode too. So. I think the Discovery crew in general had a lot of wisdom to share. A Starfleet that was really struggling to survive.
Well, although I would say when she finally gets him to say it's 85 planets down from, or whatever it is, 80, whatever. I was like, oh, well, that's still a lot. It's like, well, that's like not like it's Earth and our moon. And we lost Earth or something. It's like, oh, that's something. But no, it's not 850 or whatever it was, right? Yeah.
So let's go from there. And while I have it put up the screen, fully into the briefing room now.
We were there.
So let's kind of use this to explore other aspects of the canon of Star Trek stories. When we think about wisdom in Star Trek, what comes to your mind, Larry?
Well, and there's one more thing I wanted to say about this show too. That I think something that struck a resonance with me is we, the audience, know who the Discovery crew are, and Vance and Willa. And this new recurring set of characters, I guess, the maddening thing was they were totally doing due diligence to figure out who these people are, even as we were, and every time they say, well, this, it's like, it's not in our records. I'm sorry, we have no record of that in our files, Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, we digitized our files after that. Your paperwork is all gone.
Well, I love that callback to the finale of last season. Well, now Now it's kicking them in the butt, being wiped
Yes.
from all Starfleet records.
But that frustration when they're trying to make their case, and eventually the details start to fall in. Well, there's ship's logs, there's ship's records, their personal stories. This is one great I don't know. There's a resonant theme for today. If this really was a conspiracy, millions of people have been in on it. It's a pretty great conspiracy. But at the same time, the maddening from the people who are innocent and just doing what they're doing, and to be disbelieved by somebody, that you're a good. Basically, it's like, we're the good guys. Like, why don't you get that we're the good guys, and having to prove yourself again. It's like a massive case of, don't you know who I am? And it was like, yeah. And she has to say, look, we are obviously people with a specific skill set, and nobody else here has, she's not only saying we're not only not out of sync and out of time and useless, like the main episode that came to mind in a minute we're going to talk about. She not only says, look, not only are we not relics that are useless, we're the only people that know certain stuff. We are your best, freshest link to, getting back to what makes you. Anyway,
yeah.
I just thought she made a great case for, hey, forget that. We're unique, damn it. And we deserve some respect and a special place here. We're very useful and we're very valuable. And you're crazy to overlook a resource like this right in your face. That's what.
Yeah.
We're a resource, and you're ignoring it. Yeah.
Well, and that was something else we thought about discussing. Is there's a huge aspect to creativity and in problem solving. A lot of times, the best creativity comes from bringing people with very different experiences, different backgrounds, different perspectives
outside the box.
Yeah. Get them in the same room, focus on the same problem. And they're going to tackle it all a little bit differently. And that's often how you get creative breakthroughs. And that's exactly what Michael Burnham, Saru, and the crew of Discovery have to offer. What they have is not outdated. What they have is an incredibly different perspective. You see this, this isn't spoiling anything, but you see this towards the end of the episode where Admiral Van says, this Starfleet has taken a lot of beating. Like, exploration is not our primary objective. It seems like survival very much is. Which, again, Larry, that felt like a 2020 theme for me. We're just in survival mode here, just trying to get through. There's
the spine of the animated show that Dave Rossi and Doug pitched that was going to be on StarTrek.com. Sorry, K Factor there. I
forgot about that.
There's a whole litany of people in groups who are seeing pieces of things done over the fallow times in the last couple of years popping up this season. And everybody's like, oh well. But Anyway, I didn't mean to derail the thing. This whole theme really struck me, of the people, of the diversity. It's another commentary, sadly, though, about if you don't have if you're going to have a room full of yes men or yes people, you're going to fail. You're going to be miserably failure if you don't accept the challenge of other points of view, even when they're not in conflict, just for creativity's sake, much less getting down to nitty gritty, conflicts that can be anticipated. Not even what's the problem that's in your face at the moment, but anticipating other challenges and then how to face those, so you're not just a deer in the headlights when something happens.
Larry, that's one of my favorite, most important messages from all of social psychology is groupthink, and how dangerous it is when you have people who agree with you in the same room. And many weeks ago we talked about the Space Shuttle Challenger documentary on Netflix, which is really wonderful and fantastic. It's a massive warning of what happens when we ignore dissent, when we do not allow dissent. It can be very disastrous. Zahir's got a great comment here. There's a lot of different kinds of wisdom in Star Trek. There's Gainen's traditional wisdom from age and her species. Data's childlike wisdom teaches his peers a lot. porks practicing Ferengi wisdom. Libby would very much appreciate that. Compared to coying root beer Federation idols. It's like root beer. One of my favorite quotes. There's a lot of wonderful. Zahir, I really like your comment, because it kind of speaks to, I'm just going to you gave a little mini K3. I'm going to give a mini counselor's log here, Larry. It speaks to the definition of wisdom as we define it in psychology. It's the ability of an individual to make sound decisions, to find the right or at least good answers to difficult and important life questions, and to give advice about the complex problems of everyday life and interpersonal relationships. Notice it doesn't require age. Like, we often think that wisdom is something that you only gain through age, and sometimes older people are also wiser people, but not necessarily. We can all find more wisdom in life. There's some things that my daughter at 3 years old is very much an expert at that I am not. She knows her toys and her environment and what she's capable of doing with these things way better than I am. And I approach those toys in a very fixed way. But she can do things with her magnetiles that I would never even dream to do. But she's far wiser when it comes to her day-to-day life than I am. So there's Zahir, that's why I really like what you mentioned, Giles. Who's Giles? Data's childlike wisdom. It's a very different perspective that often helps the crew to understand something more. So with that, Larry, let's dive in. We've got a lot of of canon to talk about, and if you all have shows that you think really feature wisdom at its best in Star Trek, let us know. I think we got a few examples early on, but Larry, where do you want to start?
Oh, well, let's start with the one that I just want to say too before we get further along. All the good comments in the chat coming up, but I wanted to say hello to Dela Cruz, who looks like is a new person in our community.
Hello.
Who just said, with age comes wisdom, with wisdom comes respect, with respect comes honor. Gee, there's a reason why truisms are called truisms. Yes.
and I think there's something to be said about these sayings or messages that have been passed forward in time for years and years and years. I think there is a lot of wisdom there that we should really listen to. So yeah, Larry, where should we get started?
Yeah, the show that came to mind, the episode that came to mind for both of us, I think, popped in immediately was Scotty and Geordi in Relics. Especially this notion of, I think that what drew us to this wisdom, we didn't specify, but the original point was everybody has something to contribute, and no one is a relic. Hi. No one's a relic. Everybody has something, and especially if it's part of that whole thing of everybody who's not who getting away from groupthink. Well, if you're if you pop in from a century ago, much less 8 centuries ago, you're going to have a different perspective. It doesn't always have to be, oh, look, we need somebody with information from 100 years ago on this ship, or 800 years ago for what we used to have. But yeah, having somebody I first heard people talk about a corporate memory, not whether it's a corporation or not, but somebody who's been there the longest and can go back.
Institutional knowledge.
When they're trying to repair the NASA rovers on Mars, and they have to go back and get people who knew 80s and 90s programming, pull out the original code books and look at those kinds of things. When they're looking at during Y2K, and they were having to go back and get programmers from the 60s.
Right.
I remember. That's the easy kind. But yeah, when we first we started honing in on this topic, definitely the Relics scenes with Scotty and Geordi came to mind. Poor Geordi. He's so brilliant, but he jumps out. It's like it wasn't even a woman this time, and it wasn't even a dating issue. And he's on the wrong page at the beginning, but he sees the error of his ways.
Well, I see what you did there, Larry. What is so great about this episode is when I first saw it, I remember seeing Geordi in this light didn't make me feel good at first. Because Geordi was such a character I looked up to. And to see him sort of dismiss Scotty early on was... I had such a visceral reaction to it. I was kind of upset at Geordi, and I remember feeling really sad for Scotty too. This beloved character who should be revered for being the miracle worker that he is.
Yeah.
And the scene where I want to see the bridge of the Enterprise, nobility A, B, C, or D. And to see that interaction between him and Picard kind of breaks my heart at the end of it. But then to see where everyone comes full circle at the end, and to see Geordi, that Geordi is capable of overlooking someone himself, that they are fallible. It was very unique for TNG, I think, to have this conflict and to show our human characters on the Enterprise D as being fallible. I mean, this is more DS9 territory, right? So I love that the episode features that, as difficult as it was for me to watch it when I first did. And it does show us that it's not there's more to someone than their technological expertise. This gets right back to what Jared said. Just because something might be older doesn't mean it doesn't still have value, that there is so much to gain from experience, whether or not that experience is with the newest technology.
Right. Well, I missed this when he first said it, but I think I'm actually caught up in the chat, so drink on that one.
Is that where
Jared had a comment here. He says, just a few back. Forget Y2K, my example. Think about lockdown when they were having to get COBOL programmers. COBOL? I never had to say it out loud. They had to get
I've
COBOL
never said it out loud either.
Programmers to fix the unemployment systems, which may have been a Florida thing or where you were, but I totally get it. Some of these systems have been same thing. They've been around for a long time. They had to go back and get these antiquated languages. That whole thing about living on the cutting edge, like if everybody lived on the cutting edge, then it wouldn't be the cutting edge. There's an awful lot of people, at all stages back behind, and we depend so much in life depends on, throwback technology or no technology, and that's a perfect example when it's just like when we went into lockdown and all of a sudden, drivers and delivery people, that made nothing were suddenly keeping the country going, keeping the culture going, and all of a sudden, the essential worker is the guy making less than minimum wage or gal. So yeah. It's great finding your perspective on what's important, what's that.
Charlotte says, This make me think of when Voyager went back to the 90s, and Janeway is really not good at typing on the keyboard, and of course, Scotty's iconic "Hello, computer."
Kirk driving a Model T.
I always
Except
forget.
He couldn't, so he wasn't much.
Right. I always forget about Voyager coming back to, was it 94, 90, 96 that they came back to?
96. That's half our tour business. For location sites is thank God for Future's End. Yeah.
I remember, I mean, it's such a key episode. That's where he gets his mobile, the Doctor gets his mobile transmitter. Yeah, I think, yeah. That's Relics is really a wonderful episode that really epitomizes that.
I sent you a picture. I sent you an image and everything.
Yeah. I showed it. It was right here.
Oh, you did? I missed. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you did. Okay. Yeah. Sent me my memory. Okay.
Yeah, it's been a long week, Larry. It's been a long week.
It's been a long week and a short morning. Okay.
It's been it's been a long road getting from there to here. So let's jump around the timeline because today's very wacky. I want to talk a little bit about the Kelvin timeline, and I want to talk about Spock.
This is something I never would have thought of, but then again, I don't think of the Kelvin timeline. But yeah,
you don't. I've noticed this. You often don't think of the Kelvin timeline, and I often don't have any memory of TOS episodes until you remind me of them.
One of them was around for 40 years and watched by billions of people One of them's been around for 10 years and watched by slightly less.
Fair enough.
Anyway.
Fair enough. But I will say most of the people that have seen the Kelvin films probably have not seen the original series or were not alive then. Anyways, I want to talk about Spock Prime. And there's a lot of moments of wisdom, especially in the 2009 Star Trek film featuring Spock Prime, going from his first meeting with Kirk and some of the advice that he has to give him. And Kirk's like, well, how am I gonna get you emotionally compromised? And he's like, dude, trust me, I am emotionally compromised. Like, he understands himself. He has a lot of wisdom of understanding himself and understanding what Spock in the Kelvin timeline is probably going through. And he also, as we meet him just a few times over the course of that movie, towards the end, where he's meeting Spock Prime meets Kelvin timeline Spock, there's wisdom there in the advice that he has to give to Spock. There's a lot of elder statesmen of Star Trek in Leonard Nimoy's Spock in that scene. Even in Star Trek Into Darkness, the very small cameo that Leonard Nimoy's Spock Prime has. You know, how did you defeat Khan at great cost, I think is what he said. Which, boy, that would be really weird. Like, how do you explain that? Well, I sacrificed myself to save the ship. However, my body was shot down at the Genesis planet, and the regenerating properties of that planet brought me back to life, and now I'm here. But actually, that was the other parallel timeline. Now I'm actually here. Like, boy, I wish we got a little bit more of that conversation. Like, how did Spock Prime? How did he, like, explain?
Do you have temporal police in this timeline?
Right. So, I think you're seeing a Kelvin timeline Spock that does not have that wisdom, who's very young and very much trying to understand all this stuff, who tattletales on Kirk in Star Trek Into Darkness for everything he went through, right? Set against probably the most wise character we have in the entire canon. So I think that when it speaks to wisdom, those two characters really highlight it.
I was just, wait, he was talking to Gainen? What? Oh, okay. No. You said the most wise character in all the canon. So
well, if you want to debate that.
I don't. I was just kidding. I know what.
Oh, okay.
But say what you wanted to say, because this is actually on topic. So go ahead.
Yeah, if you want to debate Gainen and Spock Prime,
Spock Elder.
I don't think it's a very fair debate because we've seen so much more of Spock than we have of Gainen. However, we know Gainen is so much older, and like her go-to character trait is wisdom. So I feel like it's just apples and oranges here.
And Gainen in the 1890s was not all that. I mean, she was hiding from her dad or whatever through there. At some point in her life, she was hiding from her dad. But she's very abrupt and curt and short with Picard, right? She doesn't go, oh, I mean, her first instincts there are not Gainen. You can tell she's got another 200 or 300 years more mileage on her by watching her 1893 self. Scott.
Let's see. Yes, we should probably add this to the drinking game. Do we drink when Ollie brings up the Kelvin universe? Well, it's going to have to be me because, Larry's not going to bring it up. And apparently I triggered Larry Nemecek there.
What did I do?
I did. Oh, I just triggered you, Larry. It's okay. Oh. All right, so let's get back to the Prime timeline here, Larry. What do you want to talk about next?
Well, see, the only danger of having a theme like, wisdom, is that it can, I keep gravitating to people of age, of experience over those, and those are some of the easy topics that came up. Here's where I was really, guys, hoping that the chat would kind of illuminate this, because we were talking like that was Next Generation-y. There was one from the original series though that I threw in at the last second, kind of, and it almost gets back to one of the tropes of the original series with all of Gene's the super advanced aliens and all of that. But one that I thought kind of hit home, I mean, the Metron standing there in his Greek robe, telling Kirk and the Gorn not to kill each other, or kill it, fight it out, and we'll see what happens. And Kirk realized on his own. No, but the Organians in Errand of Mercy, and I Set You On. What it's like in this case, it's almost like out of the mouths of babes. Oh, look, they're not babes; they're senior elders, and they're right. And the scene where Kirk and Kor, the Klingons and the Federation, are like, like, you can interfere with our right to kill him. That whole thing. It's a little. I don't know. I just now had a flash of mask wearing overlay onto that, but yeah, that's one of those things that it's the bad thing about the original series is to watch them a billion times a piece and forget some of the simplest aspects of the implications. But that's where extreme longevity in the wisdom allows people to go, this whole fighting and competing over resources and space, we're so over it.
Yeah, and that also speaks to some of the stuff I want to get into in the counselor's log about wisdom and age, and it's not something that's necessarily automatically there. You don't necessarily automatically get wise, but it does require you to sort of temper a little bit, and listen and think before you react. And this was something in my show notes that I was going to bring up later, but I'll bring it up now. Larry, one of our favorite topics, this is going to sound like we're tooting our own horn, but hey, it's our show, so I guess we can't do that. One of my favorite topics, whenever you and I do a panel, back in the before times when we used to meet in real life, one of the topics that often
what is this real life of which you speak?
It's when you could actually see people and not wear a mask and actually give each other hugs. That's
when you could actually get outside the box?
Where we didn't just exist with this blue border around us. Back in those times, something you and I talk about often is how Star Trek canon has been reinvented I shouldn't say Star Trek canon has been reinvented, but Star Trek storytelling has been reinvented every few decades.
Mm-hmm.
And the similar patterns always play out. Is people say this new stuff is nothing like my old stuff, and the old stuff is better and the new stuff is harming it. Whether it was TNG, whether it was the Kelvin timeline or Discovery and all of that sort of stuff.
Or the animated series. Or
the animated series, right.
Like the Wrath of Khan,
right.
Or
right.
I mean, yeah, yes,
right, exactly. Just because those movies featured the original series crew doesn't mean that they were welcomed in the way that we welcome them now. I think that being able to have that perspective does require getting closer to that wise place of tempering your response first, looking at all of the knowledge and the whole big picture and trying to see patterns here. That's a lot of what comes with wisdom, and this is where wisdom is different than knowledge and intelligence. It requires you to be able to temper and get perspective and to share that perspective, and that's something that I always enjoy in our conversations. And it's the parallel here is seeing those patterns is very different than having knowledge of Star Trek. It's very different than like knowing all the episodes and what happens in all the episodes. It requires you to be able to have to step back and get a bigger perspective, and that's what wisdom's about.
Oh, that's what the tagline of Trekland is That's what we say. Clarity, sanity, and the big picture. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
when you take a mega topic like the planets or the timeline or anything like that, and you start collecting data points. That's why people. It was funny to watch people's heads explode when Seven of Nine turned up on the Picard series. It's like, but she's a Voyager character. She's not a Next Generation. It's like it's the universe. That's what I keep saying. It's like to think of all those characters in little boxes. Well, we can't have them because they're not on. Because I said immediately, oh, we'll have people first said, oh, well, maybe we'll have cameos of all the Next Gen people. I'm like, have cameos from all. This is the chance for everyone who never got a movie to be resurrected before we knew who that would be. And look, everything from Seven to Brent Spiner playing Soongs to Hugh. I mean, you got a chance to other people playing Icheb, whatever. But you got a chance. That whole universe, most of those people, and some of them, people kept pointing out that T'Pol was probably still alive from Enterprise. So, probably not to be played by Jolene, who doesn't want to play T'Pol right now. But anyway, apparently. But no, thank you. I mean, I didn't think of it that way, but that's a case. It's like thinking of Star Trek as a mass, not as individual series. And I like that series better than that series, so I want to see those characters. It's like they all,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
so you're welcome.
Yeah. No. It's always been a topic I could talk endlessly with you about. Scott mentioned, this is way early on in the chat, and I wanted to make sure we highlighted the first duty. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth.
The truth.
The truth.
The truth.
This far. I beat you to it. I think you're going to the same place.
And the first duty, the show to me that forever lives as a show that shows you what a Starfleet Academy dorm room looked like.
Oh, yeah. And boy, those uniforms did not look comfortable, the cadet uniforms. No, thank you. No, thank you, Starfleet. I'm going to stay in my civilian
It's whipping them in line.
line. Yeah, it's setting them up for back problems for years to come. But Scott mentioned the first duty and Boothby. Boothby is a character we see in TNG. I think he's mentioned in DS9.
A couple of times, yeah. Well, he was mentioned on TNG before. He would say the gardener and Boothby. He mentioned him once or twice before they brought him in as a character.
Before they brought him in, yeah. And then they kept mentioning him in DS9. We see him again in Voyager. At least we see the representation of the character through the species 8472. Is that right?
8472. Yeah. Who were called the Undine in online, but
online,
STO.
Right. They sort of recreate Starfleet Academy. Anyways, Boothby's a character who has seen a lot of Starfleet cadets come and go, has maintained relationship with them as they become captains, as we see with Jean-Luc Picard, and he has this wider perspective, and Janeway. And all of these great Starfleet greats, and he has this wider perspective. He has a relationship with them that is outside of the command structure, so he can talk frankly. And he also has seen this big perspective and has so much to share.
Just like Gainen.
Just like Gainen. Yeah. Just like Gainen. And
just like
Scott. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean. The more I rewatch Voyager, the more Neelix goes up in my ranking, and the Doctor sort of comes down a little bit.
Stop watching. Stop rewatching.
The Doctor's great, but there's only so much Doctor I can take in a day. If I have too many Doctor episodes, because sometimes they pile up. Sometimes there's these moments where it's like that's a lot of Doctor episodes in a short amount of time. Anyways, I guess you could say the same thing about Neelix, but the Neelix episodes never seem to pile up for me. Anyways, what am I talking about? Boothby is a great example of that, Scott. Yes, yeah. I completely agree. We also had we had a few other examples. Speaking of Voyager, we really thought about actually both of these characters, if we think, let me make it a little bit bigger.
Did you like how I did that? I found one where they're both in one.
That's
But
pretty
to
good,
me,
Larry.
this is like, find the elder. To me, this was kind of a cheat because it was like, well, find the elder anybody, and they're going to be wiser than their young.
This is a great clip because we actually talked about Timeless, which is the 100th episode of Voyager, and features a much older Harry Kim. A Harry Kim who is no longer an ensign. Yay, Harry.
Must be an alternate universe.
Right,
Yeah.
I know, it doesn't count. But he's no longer an ensign. There is some proof of that. I don't know, Larry, if you saw the meme.
But he was a captain. That was from Endgame, the finale with Admiral Picard.
and Endgame.
He's a captain there too. Right.
He's a captain in Endgame. That parallel universe is still featuring the All Good Things uniforms. The thing I don't know if you saw this, Larry. Did you see the meme going around of acting Captain Riker from Star Trek Picard in the bridge of his ship, and he says it's just small text that says Ensign Kim, hailing frequencies open or something like that. I don't know if you saw that.
No, but I just did. In my mind's eye.
It cracked me up so much. Anyways, both Harry Kim in Timeless as well as Janeway in Endgame, the last episode of Voyager, we thought there's an aspect of wisdom here where these characters had gained a perspective. They had sort of again looked at all the data, looked at the big picture, and made some conclusions that might evade other people, and they're now making decisions based upon those conclusions that they've enacted. Again, a good example of how knowledge and intelligence is different than wisdom, that these characters have gained a bigger perspective and now are acting in that way with both Timeless and
It's almost as if you're designing a role-playing game. You should make them separate attributes.
Speaking of separate attributes, Christina with the zinger here, and she says whenever Neelix shows up too often, Janeway threatens to fuse him again with Tuvok if he doesn't return to the kitchen.
Oh, let's not. It's amazing to me how out of nowhere the Tuvix debate has bubbled up somehow.
Oh man, that is a brilliant Voyager episode. The acting in the final moments with Kate Mulgrew there, I think, is just phenomenal when she's heading down to sickbay. Oh my gosh, that episode always gets me. So good. Okay. So yeah, we had that Voyager example. And anything you want to... you also shared this
well, we were trying to go across. Well, you popped up. There's the other Enterprise one.
Yep.
Where it started off in the series where the Vulcans had all the wisdom, supposedly, but it's kind of like that outside the box thinking, where the humans were the outside the box thinkers. Right, and the Vulcans were like, well, we're the old wise guys, the galaxy, but then of the local space. But then by the end of the series, it shouldn't have been the end of the series, but by the time they started creeping into Federation era awareness, it's the humans outside the boxiness that's helping everybody else come together.
Yeah,
just when I did too.
I
love that picture, and it's the only picture in live action that we have like this. So.
Oh, this is Star Trek right here. This is the founding of the Federation. This is all founding members. As
the roots
as
of the it's not the founding, but it's symbolic.
Right. This has the founding species, as Cairo says right here. So I feel the same. I feel similarly to Enterprise as I do with the Kelvin timeline, where I think there is so much that this series has to offer, and it's often not at the forefront of a lot of the discussion around Star Trek. And Larry, I think you summed it up really well right there. Where the show begins is with Vulcans and humans. Now, the Vulcans have a lot of knowledge. The Vulcans have been around. They've been around the block when it comes to the galaxy here.
What do the Vulcan star charts tell us? Yes.
Right,
yeah.
right. They have knowledge, and they might have Vulcan wisdom in a way that works for Vulcan culture. But when it comes to being able to share their knowledge in a way that resonates and helps humans, that
it's not condescending and stifling. Yes.
Right. Like they don't that they don't have. And we see with humans there isn't a massive conflict that occurs, but their style of interacting and sharing information has led to years and years of conflict with the Andorians. And the humans, on the other hand, have absolutely no knowledge at all about deep space travel. And they have to sort of gain it all the hard way. But the humans have a little bit better ability to understand and communicate. So by the time we get to United, which is this episode that you pulled this image from, the humans, by working together with the Vulcans and forming a new relationship with the Andorians, and then, yes, there are Tellarite there as well. They played a role, I think. Somehow.
Wait, say that again.
Just seeing if you're paying attention, Larry. Just wanted to see if you're still awake.
Just trying to help Jared round out the drinking game.
Yeah. Take a drink whenever Ali makes a Tellarite joke that also triggers Larry. I think there's a lot to say about wisdom there as well. Again, Vulcans have knowledge, but they don't necessarily have wisdom. And humans might have wisdom in terms of interacting with others, but they don't have the knowledge. So it's really in that coming together that the Federation is able to do what it does.
And it's but it's in this period, in this era, I think it happened once or twice. I can't remember anything right off the top of my head, but if they didn't, they should have. Anytime Archer and the Humans, I have all their albums.
Archer and the...
Anytime Earth starts to talk about something, like, oh, come on, you guys, you Vulcans, you Andorians, get along, and you should really listen to those Tellarite guys over there. They might be fun. Stop ignoring them. Anytime they start to do that, the Vulcans just need to go, okay, are you the guys that had like a world war less than 100 years ago? It's like, where do you get? I mean, I like it when they kind of point that out. It's kind of like, wait, I'm sorry, didn't you guys almost like destroy yourselves?
Right.
We almost did too, but at least it was 1,000 years ago.
Thousands of years ago, right.
You only destroyed yourselves like Anyway,
like when we arrived, like we arrived, and your planet was in pretty bad shape. So Heidi mentions Phlox has a lot of wisdom in some episodes of Enterprise, and Charlotte says Denobians. Denobians in general seem like a chill, wise species, and I absolutely agree with that. And that might be, whether that's a Phlox thing or that's a Denobian thing, I don't know. But with Phlox, he has spent a lot of time among other species, and he has spent a lot of time understanding other cultures. And I think the wisdom that he's gained has really come from that he's able to draw bigger conclusions, and like a lot of the other characters we're talking about that show wisdom, he's very slow to act. He will listen and understand first, take some time, try to see the big picture, and then sort of move forward. So I love that.
So here's my wish. So we have Dr. Eli, the EMH now. Spoilers.
Yes.
At 32nd century. Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Starfleet headquarters. I want Dr. Eli to call up. If he's a truly emergency medical hologram who's programmed with all past doctors, and now he's got 1,000 or 800 years versus 100 years. But what a great opportunity to pull, and it would be fan service and it would be so obnoxious, but wouldn't it be cool to see him call up past, like hollow versions of past doctors, and you got You got to see either some McCoy footage, or they call in John Billingsley, or they call in Sid to, or Gates to do something historic they were known for, and
I mean,
or
Larry, I would love that.
Animal Darwin to do a memory wipe on somebody.
I
The
would.
last heroes. Yeah.
I would love that. I mean, I was.
They could part of his program, his memory file of all the best Starfleet doctors, the Federation doctors, blah blah blah.
I would love to see that. I would love to see a bit more connective tissue there. Although I think Star Trek Picard is probably most likely to show us that than
Yeah, I know,
Star
I
Trek
know. I mean,
Discovery
what I
is at
said
this
was the
point.
most fanboyish, fan servicey thing I've ever said, but
yeah, it is.
We won't have them
and I love
forever.
it. And I love it.
And I love it.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Larry, you wanted to. There's a Deep Space Nine episode, but I think we're saving it for a K3 here, unless you want to mention it right now.
No. It's well, we had Joseph Sisko.
Yes, but there's
it's fine. That's not K3. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, just to kind of round out our
So
series.
polished today. We are so polished.
Yeah, I know. I think surprisingly, all of our lifers here kind of prefer it when we're less polished like this.
Or we're a little rough around the edges.
When we're rough around the edges, yeah. There's a lot of edges, and they're very rough today. There's some pretty good examples again from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And so, first off, talking about non-wisdom or lack of wisdom is the prophets. The prophets are a good example of they have a lot of knowledge. They don't necessarily have a lot of wisdom. And they have a lot of humility in trying to understand. They have a desire to learn. They have a desire to learn through the Cisco, right? Their emissary, but they don't necessarily have a lot of wisdom. And so I want to keep making that distinction. Wisdom is not knowledge. Wisdom is something very different. A character who I think does show us some wisdom is I was gonna say Jake Sisko. He does in The Visitor.
Yeah.
And not Ben Sisko, but
Joseph Sisko.
Joseph Sisko. Thank you. My mind was going blank for a moment.
Admiral Cartwright. Oh no.
I was gonna say Senior Sisko, and that was not right. Joseph Sisko. In many moments, when we see him, not only in his parenting and telling Ben to come home, you need to take a break, you need to take care of yourself, you're working too hard, and Ben being like, Dad, I get it, I'm fine, in a very father-son kind of way. But there's is it Paradise Lost? Is that the name of the episode, Larry? What's the name of this episode
That's the two-parter. Yeah, when the
two-parter.
Huge martial law breaks out on Earth because 2 security guards are across the street. Okay, that's a budget thing. I always love that. Oh my God, it's martial law on Earth. Yeah, there's 2 security Starfleet people across the street.
Yeah.
Open your door. Martial law. No, that's just Fred and Barney, the 2 extras that are always in every episode. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I totally diverted from this.
No. As
little...
Charlotte says, Sisko's dad is the best, and in that episode, which is great. It is about the militarization of Earth. I think that episode, more than others, gets into a little bit of what is a Federation and what is Starfleet, and how are they similar and how are they different, and how Starfleet is this scientific peacekeeping arm of the Federation, but the Federation is sort of the government. It's this uniting body. So anyways, we could have a whole thing on that. But
do you think that just the scientists are the pawns of the military?
I don't know.
You'll get stabbed by a Klingon if you do, but okay.
I am sidelining that whole debate.
Okay.
Because I know
say.
I know we could fall. Yeah, I know we could fall deep into that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Is the Federation an empire? Like we could have a whole thing on that.
It started
Anyways,
military. Yeah.
right. We could have a whole thing. But
Well, be the first.
there's some ways to see his actions in Paradise Lost as stubborn. But I think over the course of those 2 episodes, you see that he really also is speaking from some wisdom as a civilian who has lived on Earth, who knows the values, who knows the line that this might be crossing, and he's able to share a perspective with Ben that really helps Ben to understand the dangers of what's happening here, and then to later discover this larger plot that is afoot in the Federation government.
Yeah.
So I really like Joseph Sisko throughout the entire series, and I think he's a bit of a highlight of season 7 too. The early episodes of season 7 where Ben is on Earth, and as Cairo says, speaking of season 7 of Deep Space Nine, Vic Fontaine has quite a bit of wisdom in much the Guinan-esque way. And it's gets back to that definition of wisdom, of being able to listen and understand, synthesize a lot of information, and share it in a way that really helps someone else. Like, that is wisdom. Like, a great teacher is very wise in being able to understand where their pupil is. And a great bartender, like Quark, like Vic. Well, Vic's not a bartender, but
No, I think he should just be the ENH, the emergency nightclub hologram. Yeah.
ENH. I like that.
I know. It's search your own middle adjective there. I was balladeer. I don't know. Yeah. Singer just doesn't cut it, so you have to be more descriptive. So.
Oh man, and Jared, I am all on board. Live support, live retreat, Cafe Du Mont, New Orleans, Louisiana. I would be 100%.
Coffee is strong at the Cafe Du Mont.
Oh yes, it is. Especially, Jared.
Jimmy
a little
Buff-
story for you.
Okay.
First time I was there for a psychology conference. I never had a beignet before, and I was trying to be very mindful and really take it in. So I pulled it up, and of course I was, right? And one of the things about mindfulness is really being present in the moment, really honing all your senses. So I grabbed that beignet. I was like, oh, it's so warm and it feels so crispy and yet soft. And then I brought it close and I tried to smell it. And then I inhaled all that powdered sugar, and it burned. It burned, Larry. It did not feel good at all.
The ring of beignets.
The ring of beignets.
Burns. Yeah.
The ring of beignets. The ring
All
of
eras,
beignets.
all genres, we bring it. Okay.
Yeah. Whatever you want, it'll be at the Live Sport Live retreat. Should we move forward, Larry?
We should.
The counselor's log. Let's close. Let's get out of the briefing room here, and we're gonna go into the counselor's log. I'll make it quick because I know we spent a lot of time exploring a lot of aspects of the
how to get online through Cam. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll make this very quick. I've already mentioned a few things before that we often think of wisdom as something that comes with age, and that is not necessarily true. That wisdom isn't something that's sort of guaranteed in the way that we've been talking about it. There are other aspects of wisdom, so we know that as you age, the connections between your memories do increase. So while people who are older, they might not respond as quickly. Like if you ask them to remember something, their memory might not be as fast as someone in their 20s, but they're able to make a greater breadth of connections. They're able to see disparate things as more connected and to draw more conclusions from the events and experiences they've had in life. So that does come with age. However, this ability to be wise in the way that Gainen or Vic, as we've been talking about, that's something that's a little bit different. And there's a few things that we can all practice, and I'll get into with the away mission, that can help us all to be a bit more wise. So we know wisdom, a big part of it is learning how to press the brakes on your emotions so you don't react impulsively. We know that's a big part of it. We know that a big part of wisdom is having some humility in acknowledging that you might not have all the answers and looking elsewhere to gain knowledge and gain information. Yeah.
I have no ego to bruise.
Nah.
love that
Oh
line.
man, of course, and of course, Spock is our most wise example there.
You have to steep your fingers when you say that, though.
So it requires a lot of humility and also highly valuing learning, and being open to new information that might conflict with what you thought you knew. It also requires a lot of tolerating uncertainty and being okay with not knowing, and sitting with that, and so not reacting, but being okay with the not knowing and trying to gain knowledge, trying to gain understanding, and not reacting on the first thought you have. And it also requires a lot of compassion towards yourself, that you might not know all the answers, that you might make mistakes, and to learn from those mistakes. And so as you start to unpack what it really means to be wise and how you can gain wisdom, you can understand how not everyone gains it. We all know older individuals who are very wise. We also know older individuals who might be a bit more impulsive and not that wise as well. So that's why wisdom doesn't necessarily come along with age, and why sometimes the most wise around us might be people who are younger. As Zahir mentioned with Data, and the example I gave with how my daughter plays with her toys, and how I would not ever approach it in that way either. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm going to get to
Old
I'm going to get
souls.
to a what to do with all of that in a moment. But before we get to that, Larry, I could really go for a K3 factor right now.
You could go. Well, this is the new promo for this. I could really go for a K3 about now. Yeah. Hey, could you go for a K3 about now? No, this
could
is.
you go for a K3?
I could really go for a K3. Wouldn't you really rather have a K3? Okay. Wow, where'd that come from? I know, Buicks. For those of you old enough. No, so the K3 this week, this whole topic about wisdom through experience or age or whatever. So I was trying to apply that to behind the scenes backstaging, because that's what we do in Trekland. We do connect the dots, but a lot of times we also focus on all the folks besides those actors who look pretty and tell great stories on stage for an hour, but then get them off. Get them off that, and who cares? No. I was trying to think of a case where someone was bringing, and there's been a lot of, Star Trek is replete with people who, Star Trek has always done more with the money they were given. There's always tons of bang for the buck, the most creative. You can be creative, but if you have to spend $1 billion to get there, the people who would, dumpster diving for set decoration that John Dwyer would do on the original series, that they all keep, all the art people do to this day, apparently. But one that I love is the story of the 90s, and it feels old now because we changed so quickly. But when visual effects went from all the, King Kong era stuff, almost melee still, Earth to the Moon, when visual effects was still models and motion control and, matte paintings and using vapor for fog and vortexes and all, when it was still all hands-on and analog before everything went digital, it was built digitally. There was the tension. There was a inflection point in the 90s. Can you put the first one up? When a show like Babylon 5 was pioneering.
Oh, yes.
Babylon 5. And
Larry, I was trying to figure out when you sent me this image. I'm like, what is this from? And it looked familiar, but I couldn't remember.
Anyway, make it as big as you can, because
that's as big as I can make it.
So here you go, guys, crossing streams. But in the day, we're talking like the 90s, the early mid 90s. Babylon 5 was pioneering visual effects, CGI, and they were like, ooh, and there'd been CGI in movies, but CGI was like expensive and time consuming, and did I say expensive? And only certain people could do it. And Babylon 5, Ron Thornton and Foundation were trying to pioneer doing CGI effects on a weekly basis. And I know this sounds like ancient history now, because it is. But the point was, here's the granddaddy franchise, Star Trek, with 2 shows on the air, 2 series by then, Voyager and Deep Space Nine, and not that they hadn't used, like the Silicon Avatar was digital and put into the, and Baby Junior and Baby, the spacefaring mama and the spacefaring baby that they helped birth. Those were CG, to name 2 examples. But CGI, the aliasy, as you saw in that one there, it was still early. They were still it took forever to render out. They would do the program and then to wait for the thing to actually, like the printer, not really on paper, but the thing that actually manufactured the file took forever because the capacity they had then. And I'm talking about the early, like 93, 94, 95, 96, 97. And there was a big push and pressure on Star Trek. Just every year was a new revolution, right? And things did get better and better and better. And even over the life of, say, Babylon 5, you could see that arc. But they were out there pushing it to be pushing it. And the whole way the show was set up and the things they wanted to visualize was dependent on the freedom of CGI. Oh, it's not a ship on a mounting bar that you couldn't barrel roll. Right, that you have with the physical model. And there was pressure as we got into Voyager and DS9, and here's DS9 wanting to do space battles, right, as they get the Klingon War, and then as they get to the Dominion War. And Voyager is starting to they did things like the rubber band effects on the warp ships. That was one of the first times they used digital, because it was much easier than what they did originally with the D, which is this expensive process with slits, and you can watch old documentaries about how they made the first jump to warp on Next Generation. But that was the thing, they were adapting digital. But Star Trek's both shows had 2 teams of visual effects that worked together under Dan Curry, and there were 2 different supervisors who were the team, because there was so much work to do and they alternated shows. And on DS9, the 2 most experienced ones from the first year of Next Gen, one of the 2 on each show, Ron Moore on Next Gen and Gary Hutzel on DS9, Gary Hutzel, who went on to work on the new Babylon 5. But Gary Hutzel was such
best chance for peace.
I know, I'm getting so in the weeds here, but bear with me. My point here is that Voyager's curve, they were trying to do more and more with CGI. They knew all the problems. They knew that by then the CGI programmers were all computer boys who didn't know about art. And as Dan Curry once told me, they'd get things from CGI guys that had like a ship, a planet, and 3 points of light sources. It's like, no, there's one sun, and it's all going to be like the bright spot of everything is like 3 different. It's like they're just trying to make it look pretty, and they're like, yeah, but it has to make sense, guys. It still has to be grounded, and So that old time curve. But Gary Hutzel, who was always the senior member of the 2DS9, whoever it was adamant. He was like, no, we are not doing CGI on my show. My shows will not have CG till we can do it and it looks decent, and I'm not at the whim of some visual effects house. My point about wisdom here is that when they got to big space battles, Gary pushed the old analog envelope as far as it could, to the point where they were using, see what he's got here, when they were trying to do the Klingon battle of Way of the Warrior, and that was the first big one. Those were all like AMT model kits. They had the big this is the same Way of the Warrior. These shots, rather than worry about getting the big models out, which were huge, and if you actually wanted to have 10 or 15 in a shot, you were having to shoot them and light them, and that's like 15 composites and passes. And even if you could pay for that, the bigger thing was time. They didn't have the time to do all that on their setup. So he came up. Can you go back to that one where he's in front of the black? Yeah. So they were just doing things like they would get AMT model kits, put them together, and then they'd keep them in the background. But that's what half of it. It's like the asteroid field story. Like, just put more in the background and you're like, wow, there's hundreds. You're only seeing 1 or 2 or 3 in the foreground that are detailed. And he would come up with, based on the wisdom of his years. They even got can you put the Rotaran docked at DS9?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Here's the ultimate. I just love this story. So the original, there's more ships in the background. See, but that fit, rather than having one or two, they've made a whole field there. But this one on the left is the one I'm talking about. The original Bird of Prey model, you've seen it, is like 4 or 5 feet wide, and it's supposed to be a tiny ship. And to put it up against the station, they had to film. If they really wanted to, they couldn't put the same shot. It always had to be composited because the model was as big as the station model. And you couldn't shoot them together live. What somebody found out, probably was Gary, was that the Hallmark Christmas ornament, which was really detailed pretty well.
You're kidding.
The Hallmark Christmas ornament was the exact same scale to be in scale when you were at the real DS9 model. And so that shot.
Oh my gosh.
You saw when you saw a Bird of Prey docked at the station. Now, it's been enhanced. They've come back and animated glowing light there in the impulse engine behind it there. But that shot, that's the Hallmark DS9, that's the Hallmark model Bird of Prey docked at the station because they could put it there in real life and save all that time. They didn't have to composite them and mat them together and all of that. They could just shoot it and still had to put the starfield in behind and all that. But what I'm saying is, here is Gary Hutzel with a CGI revolution and all the pressure to go CGI, you can do all this, and he's like, no, it will look CGI. They used to say it looks too CGI-ish when it would alias, and you had this like that Babylon 5 image, and he said we're not doing it until we have the technology and I can control the image, and I'm not depending on some effects house goes, here our CGI wizards are giving you this, take it or leave it. Which is what the situation they were in a lot. It's like, can you tweak this and this? Well, we'll do one of them. They hated that. I mean, he hated that. He's like, no, my name is on it. I want it to be my image. And that's just an internal, the way the industry is, and there's two models of doing it. But Gary Hutzel was one who had been around the analog world long enough. He pushed the envelope so that they didn't look outdated and they could keep up with doing space battles, even as they weren't just going to the CGI. And that was a very long tree.
But it's worth it. It's worth it. That was I did not see where that was headed with the Hallmark. That's awesome because I used to get those Hallmark ornaments not as a Christmas tree ornament, but just because I love playing with those ships so much. And they were some of the most detailed
all the way
ones.
You could get a ship.
Yeah, Christina.
The visual effects guys in art department would every once in a while they would come through licensing because they kept examples, or they would get samples, extra stuff, and they would, as it got into DS9, the Kit Bash Army, the Kit Bash Navy, the Kit Bash fleet of DS9, where they all like Kit Bash things.
Well, tell folks what kit bashing means. Not everyone might know what that
is. When you take a model kit that's manufactured to be a certain way, and you modify it. And you might take a kit and do modifications, like if you want to get a Galar class Cardassian and make it a Keldon class and build a new deck for the top.
Just add a thing. Yeah.
Or you might, kit bashing is
turn a Galaxy class into a Nebula class.
Yeah, or you put the third, or what you take manufactured kits as was intended and get parts from another kit, and you recreate something that you saw, or you totally cosplay, you model play your own ship. And that's really and all those ships that you saw DS9 do, they didn't have the budget to have full-blown miniatures done. A lot of the space battles had, like the Columbia. There's one episode where they took one of the best, and everybody on the staff just sat down and played Kid Model Builder and did that. And a lot of the ships that you see in the debris fields, like, it's a ship, best of both worlds, Mike and Rick did this, but by the DS9 time, the entire art and visual effects staff all had a model building day or two where they all just sat down, and they all decaled them. That's where you get the USS Curry and the USS Eklund and the USS Buckner, which was what the Columbia? It's the sea ship that you saw in a highlighted. Anyway, that's all. When they would do those days, they would roll over to licensing and go, have you guys got any extra model kit boxes? Okay. And they walk away with 10 or 12 not only was it cheap to film, they didn't even like pay for the model kits. They would go over to
I love it. I love it.
the club. Yeah.
I love these two comments. Christina saying your favorite Prime Trek battles are just guys playing with toys, and then of course Zahir with this isn't a toy, it's a model. I love it. That's great. That's great for me as a kid who grew up playing with those models. I remember this one summer I bought a Voyager, a Enterprise D, and probably a Constitution class, and I painted them all black. I made them all matte black, and in this, bear with me, it was my way of creating a stealth Starfleet fleet. Because the Treaty of Alderaan, you can't have cloaking technology, so I thought, in what way could the Federation create more stealth vehicles? And then I thought, well, don't paint them white, like paint them black. They'll be a little bit more stealthy, and so that was my stealth fleet.
That'll fool anybody with bad writers. Yeah.
And then I came home from college one year, and I saved those models for like years and years and years, and then my mom like threw them away, and I'm like, Mom, that was my stealth fleet, and she's like, you still played with that? I'm like, well, no, but like I liked it. It's my fleet. It
was your youth. It was hours of your youth, and Mom, in 30 years, people are gonna haul that stuff out and put it on Instagram, and they'll be cool.
Right. I know. Oh, I love how Scott said, Lily, that's
some of my railroad models, and I saved some of my structures, and I saved two. I saved my, even though it busted because it was I saved my my Estes flying model rocket Enterprise because I had but by that time I was doing the whole spray and matte paint and decals down and putty and sand and do all this stuff.
Oh gosh, I love that. But I love this K3, Larry, because it really speaks to like the wise action, not the cutting edge action, or the wise decision, not the cutting edge decision, but how do we save money and make it work with the limitations? Like, use the limitations of the format to our advantage. This is not HD. People aren't going to be able to tell that level of detail. That's a wonderful tradition in a lot of production.
Well, I just want to say when I would talk about using those ships, the Hallmark was a standout because you only saw those for it'd just be like a second or two, right?
Right.
We still frame everything, but that thing about the mask, they would put ships on racks. They would get Hallmark ornaments and like have those same bird of praise and get like a rack and have like 5 or 6 like this, almost like you had a stick. And you just hung one every 8 inches. But they would film that in the background so that, like in those shows, when you'd see like a fleet of bird of praise flying in the far background, not foreground.
Yeah.
But that was like they did one pass, one film, one light, instead of having 5 or 6. But finding that bang to the buck, it is time, it is budget. But there was also a quality issue. And when they got to what they could do with them, like I said, he was hanging, not the 7th year. The last season of DS9 was when they finally said, okay, the technology has got the point, but I'm going to have them submit to me. And they started using all the huge battles of the last season, RCG, most of them.
Larry, and that is a great complicating factor now, because that is one reason why we don't necessarily have the HD HD copies of Voyager and Deep Space Nine. With the Next Generation, and the original series, the reason they were able to be converted over to HD is all the negatives still existed. They could do high quality images of those negatives. They could scan the negatives at a high
generation. Original series was built from scratch.
The effects were built. They had to rebuild the effects, right? But they were able to easily scan in. Easily able to scan in the negatives. With TNG, they could rescan all the effects, and in some areas they had to enhance it. The problem with DS9 and Voyager is the later seasons of DS9, but more later seasons of Voyager, there was much more a shift to CG. Those original files, you can't use those original files. You have to rebuild all those effects.
I sent you one other picture, didn't I, though, of Gary?
the other picture I have is I'll put it up anyways because you should probably talk about it right now.
Oh, I
Is
thought I
this?
didn't send you one of Gary standing over a ship model, a wreck.
I don't. Oh yeah. I think you did. While I'm pulling
Who's
that
directing
up,
this?
um, yes, here it is. I don't know why I didn't show this one earlier. What wreck is this?
This is the sound of this is Gary. This is a physical. This is like the next to last season. This is from the sound of her voice when they're talking.
Oh, DS9 season
And
7.
they finally find her ship, but it's wrecked, and she's long
Yeah.
dead. But the
Yeah.
wreckage of her ship on the planet. This was the scene. Anyway, it's Gary sitting there with the wreckage. It's like half of a Constitution class hull, ripped open. You can see the decks and everything inside. But this was just about again. You'd think even a wreckage, like who's going to look at the detail? But they just like look, just put a little rocky, just build that model railroad layout mountain back there, and stick this wreck on it, and we'll just film it because all they did was push in. It was just a landscape.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cheap. Better than doing anyway. It was faster for him than doing CG, and he thought it looked better. And anyway, but that's Gary.
Yeah.
Who
one of my favorite...
I would love to have him as a guest on Portal 47, but he sadly passed away suddenly. He had one of those heart murmur things that no one knows about until it happens, and he passed shockingly 4 or 5 years ago and shocked everybody. Or else, great loss.
Great loss. We have so many wonderful examples we could pull from, which is an example of this. And one of my favorites, I think it's Star Trek 3, when the Enterprise is entering space dock. There's a little tiny like pod that goes by, and I learned many years later that it's based on a shaver kit. It's like, when you buy a bunch of razors and you get the refills. Yeah, it's like it's one of those things. And if you
the little nacelles are like the stem of a throwaway razor, of a disposable razor. Yeah,
and you won't see it until someone like tells you and you look for it. But there's so many wonderful examples of you don't always have to do things. This gets back to exactly what Jared said in the very beginning, what inspired this whole week's episode.
Surely not.
Just because you aren't up to date doesn't mean you aren't useful. It might not be cutting edge effects, but it might be exactly what you need in that moment. So wonderful K3 Larry.
Yeah. What do you need to tell the story? For their situation, it's what tells the story best. Yeah.
So I got a quick away mission for all of you. Scott says, that's from TNG 11001001.
Let the chat correct you. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Larry,
It was reusing the space dock model. That's what you were thinking of.
Right,
yeah.
Right. It all gets crossed in my head. All right, so away mission. This is the part of the show where I give you one specific way to apply what we're talking about to your life. So, Larry, the other thing I was thinking about as I refill my coffee, because I am running on fumes here today.
Caffeine depleted.
And I feel like my nacelles are complete. I need more dilithium.
Look at this. I still have yeah.
So, thinking about an away mission today, I was... I was thinking, like, how do I give folks an away mission that is related to wisdom and also helpful in some way in these times that we're in? And then I just had to remember, wow, we're in a tough spot right now, Larry. In most of the world, chances are, well, I mean, your spot is good and this spot is good, but we, humanity, are in a tough spot right now.
Okay.
Yeah, the pandemic that's kind of raging on. So chances are you are in a spot of the world, unless you live in New Zealand and a few other places. Chances are you're in a spot where rates of COVID-19 are increasing, and you might be in a spot, as some of our European colleagues here are, where there is a new lockdown, and many of us, including you and me, Larry, might be experiencing another lockdown pretty soon. So we're entering a winter, we're entering
Of
another
discontent.
unknown. Yeah. Winter is coming, and we're entering a another tough spot here. So, wisdom, I think, is really important right now, because there's a lot of knowledge we don't have. There's a lot we don't know. Yeah, there might be there's some good promising results coming related to vaccines, but the Pfizer this week announced they've had some good promising results,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not peer-reviewed research, and it's 2 shots of a vaccine, and it's hard to transport, hard to manufacture. We need a lot of different vaccines. We need to figure out which one works best for what ages and what backgrounds, and what's easily can be shipped around the whole world and easily manufactured. So there's a lot of unknowns we're getting into right now. It is a time for wisdom. And the easiest way to apply everything we're talking about this week, it actually gets to a tweet that you sent out this week, Larry. You inspired my away mission for this week. And it gets to history. Looking at history can be one of the easiest ways to enhance our sense of wisdom. And while we might all feel like we're entering uncharted time right now, remember what I said. Wisdom is about pressing the brakes, getting a bigger picture, and looking at the patterns of information and drawing some conclusions based on that. That's what wisdom is. Larry, you sent out a tweet about, I think you retweeted, the History Channel had a podcast deep dive into the 1918 flu.
Oh,
And
right.
yeah, and that actually inspired my away mission for this week. Is we have many periods in history where humanity has gone through big periods of uncertainty. Our ancestors lived through World War II, a massive period of uncertainty. We can draw hope from that. We can draw lessons from that about how people coped with uncertainty there. We have the 1918 flu epidemic. How did people cope with the rising rates? There was a drop, and then there was
And
a
not
rise.
cope.
And not cope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Similar problems that happened then are happening now. And then we can go even farther back in history. There's been many periods of plagues that humanity has dealt with. So what are the big lessons we can draw from our past? Let's put the brakes on all the heat of the emotions of now and look back a little bit. So this is my away mission for all of you, is if you feel very much like you're struggling with going into this winter and the uncertainty, take a look back at what has been written about 1918. Take a look back at how people coped with the uncertainty of World War II. That's something, Larry, that gives me a lot of hope. Is all of our ancestors lived through the uncertainty of World War II, and there's a lot of wisdom we can gain from those lessons and how to move forward with this. So there's that. And if none of that works, as Scott said, buy an Eagle Moss Starship.
Because what's
That'll
cool
help.
is you don't have it on your display shelf. You can pull off the nacelles and shave with it.
Yeah, right. So with that, Larry, let's move into our hailing frequencies just for a moment. Let's catch
As
up
if we haven't already. Yeah.
Yeah, let's catch up on our conversation, folks. I just want to give a shout out. Hopefully, I can find one of your comments again. We have a new person on YouTube this week. Trek on the Tube.
Yeah.
We've been loving your questions and your comments here. And Trek on the Tube had a question.
That's your podcast.
Yes. Does it take a very wise person to write the very wise things Gainen says or does? Larry, I want to turn this to you before I give my thoughts on this. What do you think?
Wow. I'm going to say no, since she was first written by Maury Hurley. No, I don't. That's not me. He's not around to defend himself. That's an interesting. There's kind of attack about. There's a lot about the current Star Treks, the Secret Hideout, the Kurtzman era, about being so diverse, right? Oh, look, they're just a diversity pie. They're with all the. But one thing they're doing, it's also diverse in the writers' room. But part of the diversity in the writers' room that I've seen is they actually have writers over 35. There's a lot of, I mean, Michael Chabon on, especially Picard, which I guess is nice because Picard's an elder. But even the Discovery Room has writers in their 40s. And that was a real knock on Hollywood about all these 30-year-old kids are running around thinking you had, on one hand, you're too old to write and be with it. But on the other hand, there was there was a real simplicity of plotting, whether it was a sitcom or even the 1-hour dramas. And that's one thing that like you had the boys, Jerry's boy, like baby Ron and baby Brannon and baby all of them, Renee and Narain. But but when it started and when things settled, you had a lot of veterans at the beginning. But by the third season, Michael Piller was around the block. Jerry Taylor had been around the block. Ira had been around the block. He was a young writer, but he was young in his 30s, not young in his 20s. When he came to DS9 and had been through 4 or 5 or 6 series and been canceled and knew what he wanted to do. And a lot of the people that wrote Next Generation and Voyager and DS9 and then Voyager kind of swung young. But a lot of people say it takes a certain, experience level of a writer to be able to bring some depth to exactly what we're saying here. And there's a big criticism about Hollywood generally about the writers are way too young. In a lot of cases, there are showrunners running shows they not only haven't had years, but they've never lived outside their apartment in L.A. or their house. Yeah. Like they've never been out in the world and seen the rest of the country, or they're all stuck in their apartment in New York or something, and like they've never experienced the rest of the country, and it shows that and if they're not writing about a certain neighborhood in L.A. or New York, if they're trying to write some Midwestern whatever show or about ordinary people, that they haven't had enough life experience for whatever reason to get there. And that's, I just think some of the newer shows are finally getting there, but it's nice to have a mix. You always have like the young kids being mentored to come up, and I'm talking about writers here. You could go for other departments too, but especially with writers. To get back to the question there about writing, how do you write wisdom for Gainen if you're 18, not 18, if you're 25 or 30, she tends to not have been written by 25 and 30-year-olds is what I'm saying. Yeah. The guys were still young when they wrote like the tail end episodes of when Ron and Brannon and those guys were coming up through Next Gen. They were still on the 30-ish side, but I think they'd been around the block. Ron had been in the Navy. That will age you. So that's what I would say to that. Probably too.
Yeah. And I think one of there's two things that I just want to add to that. Larry, you're right on about how this can be a big blind spot in Hollywood, and it's why it's so important to have that diversity in a writer's room. Because if you don't, like you were talking about, like if you're writing about another region or a culture, for example, like let's say you're writing about the Midwest, if you don't have any experience with that, what you're going to write is probably going to be based on stereotypes. So it's important to have diversity of experiences as much as age as well. And the best writers' rooms, I think, are those where there is that diversity of experience, and you can run things by each other, and you can also, there isn't groupthink. If you write something that doesn't feel true to the character or the character's background, you can call each other out on that, and you can revise. So the best writers' rooms are where there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of productive disagreement that leads to good stuff there. So
my point is, in the big push to make writers' rooms more diverse, people think about genre. People think about they think about genre. People think about gender, and they think more women and more trans non-binary, but they think about gender, and they think about race and culture. Yeah. But the one of the biggest parts of discrimination, of non-representation, has been ageism. And has been older writers, and there's lots of it's like actors. The old thing about when actresses turn, 35 and they're too old. They don't come back until they're grandmas. It's like wonderful leading. That's changed and changing, and writing scripts for women and women writing scripts for women. It's been a long road getting from there to here. But one of the biggest, things about need to diversify Hollywood has just been that older writer, where that didn't used to be. Like in the 50s and 60s, that wasn't the case, but somewhere along through the 80s and 90s, it's competition for eyeballs and thinking we've got to write for younger people and all that. And anyway, but that's swinging back too, I think. And Star Trek, Star Trek's been in the forefront of that.
I love that you brought up Star Trek Picard for that.
Even to the point where a 38-year-old is like too old. That's
what's great about Star Trek is you have a writer's room that was run by someone who's older, featuring an actor who was much older as well as the lead. So I think that's wonderful. One thing, Trek in the Tube, I want to say is, if you I'm thinking about young writers who have written books or write for the internet or have written their own shows or movies. You do need to be wise as it relates to your experience. So those things I mentioned before about being humble, trying to understand, being open to new perspectives, putting on the brakes before you react, all of those things can apply to our own life experiences as well. So not necessarily believing your memory of an experience, talking to other people who were also involved in that experience, having an intellectual humility about how you approach your own memories and your own life. That's where a lot of your own wisdom can come. So you can be a wise 15-year-old. You can be a wise 25-year-old. You can be a wise 35-year-old.
Right.
It does take effort, though. You have to apply all these things to your own life.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a lot.
Maybe we can take one more comment that you want to
Well, I like Charlotte here, who said it's younger than. I was just talking about women stereotyping, and she says it's younger than that. She'd say This is what I was trying to say, but yeah, you're specifying. It's even worse than that about women being. You hit 30 and you're stuck with a mom role. You can't be leading, independent character anymore. So, and then right after that, Galinda is saying, and then we have Michelle Yeoh,
who is amazing, and I have no idea where they are taking. They're taking her character next, but she's amazing. She's been wonderful.
Yeah.
Larry, okay, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about Portal 47. You have a big anniversary coming up.
Well, if it's our 5th anniversary, and you guys have been hearing me talk about this, the update here is that due to scheduling, because people are alive and working, and good for that, we had to bump our open house back to December 9th. So hopefully this year especially, it's not intruding too much on holiday plans and shopping plans. Normally, this is an October event. We already had to bump it once, and bumping it again, I think we're going to be okay. But anyway, David Carson, who directed Generations, who directed the pilot of DS9 Emissary, who directed Yesterday's Enterprise, is our open house guest. The open house from Portal is Portal 47, which is our mini-con all year long of live and archival features. From me, it's my way of bringing people all the Star Trek they had no idea about. Like the K3 Factor today, we've got some portales here in our live support community too. So every year on our anniversary, delayed a little this year, but we open the gates and let everybody in for a big guest. That's what this is. We'll have door prizes and a little open mic roundtable too, and at least an hour. Talking with David Carson, and we think we're good. It's Wednesday night, 7 Pacific. I know that's bad for Europe, but that's when we do it. But just go over to my site, LarryNemecek.com, and click in Save a Virtual Seat, and it's all free. And please, 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 everybody, come over. Again, if you enjoyed what I was talking about today on the K3 especially, if you did or didn't appreciate my snarky comments the rest of the time, but especially if you enjoyed K3, that's what everything I do in Trekland is about. All my podcasts and shows and my businesses, my writing. So yeah, please do that.
And as I start the as Libby would say, the sad music at the end of the show. I just want to second that, folks. If you enjoyed that K3 Factor, just hanging out with Larry is like a constant K3 factor because Larry, you've got this wisdom perspective as it comes to Star Trek. I want to definitely share that. Like I always gained so much of a deeper, wider understanding of Star Trek just by hanging out with you. So really support everyone checking out more of Portal 47 if you're interested in learning more. This is now going to be...
I'm with you about, brain stuff.
Speaking of brain stuff, I have now, will be the third week I've said, well, next week I'm going to have a video coming out about my biggest epic fails. I was supposed to have that come out this week, and work has just been so busy this week. So hopefully I'm going to have that out soon. And a couple of just housekeeping businesses. And so where you can find that is youtube.com/The Psych Show. That'll get you to all of my psychology, mental health related stuff. Trek on the Tube, you mentioned that emotions are hard for you to put the brakes on. I got a lot of videos about how to quickly bring down anxiety, how to deal with that kind of stuff. So feel free to check that out. A little bit of housekeeping. We're going to be taking Thanksgiving weekend off. We're going to be having a little bit of a break. A little bit of a mental health break where we're gonna rest and recharge. However, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, we're aiming to do our Star Trek First Contact watch party.
Remember, guys?
Remember we were gonna do this? So we're doing it Thanksgiving week. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna hang out together. We're gonna watch Star Trek First Contact. We're gonna put a poll on our Facebook group that is asking you for the best times to do that. So if you're not already a part of our Facebook group, go to Life Support Live on Facebook, join that group. It's how we hang out. And Larry, where can people find you?
I was going to say, just to clarify, we're talking, for everybody who's not American, has this ingrained in your brain, we're talking about the American Thanksgiving holiday, which is the 26th. So we are we are omitting the Saturday the 28th. We'll be back next week. Next week is the 21st.
Next week we're here. Yeah.
Yeah, we're here next week. So that 28th Saturday, we won't be. But on Tuesday, the 24th, we're talking about doing this. But we're still picking a time, right? We're going to run a survey on time.
Yeah. Just go to our Facebook group. You'll see it there. And folks, we can't wait to see you again next week. So with that, live long and prosper.
Hey, everybody. Trek well.